My stepdaughter rolled her eyes at me, so I tried to discipline her. My girlfriend called it abuse, packed their bags, and vanished overnight. Now the entire family says I deserve everything that's happening. The problem started with my girlfriend Lydia's daughter, Cassidy. She's 14, which already explains half the issue. She has the usual teenage attitude, the constant eye-rolling, the heavy sighing, the way everything is a burden. I didn't blame her at first. I blamed the normal developmental nonsense kids fall into. Lydia always said I needed to give Cassidy space because she's sensitive, but all I ever asked for was basic respect. I wasn't asking for chores or huge responsibilities. Just don't treat me like an idiot in my own home. The day everything blew up wasn't supposed to be anything significant. Cassidy was in the living room after school eating snacks. We have a rule about no food in there because she leaves crumbs everywhere, and the couch cushions already have stains from before I moved in. I reminded her about it. She rolled her eyes at me. The second she did it, I realized I had let too many little things slide, and this was the moment where the disrespect needed to be corrected. If she kept operating like this, she was going to grow into someone who thought rules were optional. I wasn't going to let that happen, so I decided she needed a direct consequence that would actually stick. Taking a phone for a few hours means nothing. Telling her to think about her behavior means nothing. She needed something that would interrupt the automatic attitude she throws around all day. I unplugged her power strip from her room, the one that her lamp, TV, and router access go through. I took the entire strip with me so she couldn't cheat her way back online. I held out my hand for the bedroom key. I installed the keyed doorknob myself last year because she kept slamming it, and having the key meant I could regulate privacy when she abused it. She handed it over immediately once she realized I wasn't joking. I set the door open and posted a handwritten list of respect rules I made for situations exactly like this. Nothing extreme, nothing harmful, simple points about curfew, attitude, personal space, tone, and permission protocols. I called it a corrective reflection period. 48 hours. No electronics, no snacks, no closing the door, no leaving her room without asking, no talking back. It was reasonable. She cried. It wasn't a breakdown. So I told her tears don't change anything, and she needed to accept consequences like a mature person. I explained everything to her clearly, pacing the room while she sat there. When Lydia got home early and found Cassidy crying with the door off and the lamp gone, she acted like she walked into a crime scene. She didn't even say anything to me at first, just grabbed Cassidy and told her to get her things. She moved with this determination I've never seen from her before. She started packing bags before I even processed what she was doing. I told her she was blowing it out of proportion. She ignored me completely. She left within an hour, and the house was dead quiet after they were gone. I assumed she just needed time to cool down and would come back to talk like an adult. I even expected an apology for undermining me in front of Cassidy. Instead, the next morning half the house was empty. She took everything of hers and Cassidy's, plus a bunch of my stuff by accident. Then her parents, siblings, cousins, whoever else they drag into their chat groups, all started attacking me. They acted like I locked Cassidy in a basement. They were throwing around words like abuse and cruelty and controlling. It was dramatic and over the top. I tried explaining to them that teenagers need boundaries and consequences. They didn't care. I didn't even do anything physical. I didn't touch her. I didn't scream at her. I didn't shove her. I didn't curse. I removed privileges. That's parenting. That's common sense. But now Lydia has vanished with her daughter and refuses to answer any of my messages. Her family is calling me unhinged and dangerous. A few of them even said they always had a bad feeling about me, which is ridiculous because none of them complained when I was paying for groceries or fixing things around the house. The whole situation is exaggerated to a point that makes no logical sense. I can't get anyone to listen to the actual facts, but right now it feels like I'm being punished for doing the right thing. Update 1. I thought posting here would at least show people how dramatic Lydia's family was being, but all it did was make everything worse. They got screenshots, shared them around, and by the time Lydia's parents reached out asking for a discussion, it was clear they weren't interested in hearing anything from me. Still, I went, because I figured someone needed to be the adult in the room, instead of feeding into the hysteria they'd all decided to run with. The meeting was at her parents' place. They live in a neighborhood where every house looks the same and everyone pretends they never argue, so I already knew the whole thing was going to be performative. I walked in expecting tension, but I wasn't expecting an entire table covered in printed photos. They acted like they had uncovered some criminal operation. Cassidy had taken pictures of her room before they left everything unplugged. Outlets hanging open, the power strip gone, her desk empty. the handwritten rules taped to the door, and the door leaning against the hallway wall. They laid it all out like evidence in a case. Lydia's parents sat like they were dealing with a dangerous person. Her brother paced like he was preparing for a fight. Lydia herself wouldn't even look at me. She stood near the wall with her arms crossed, and Cassidy stayed behind a cousin, like she needed physical protection. The whole thing was absurd. They were acting like I had done something extreme when all I did was establish boundaries a teenager kept pushing. I explained everything exactly how it happened. I described it as standard consequences, nothing out of control. I told them teenagers need structure and need someone to enforce it. They didn't care. They kept fixating on the door, the electronics, the crying. Her brother lost it. He yelled, shaking, like he was holding himself back. Lydia still refused to talk directly to me. Her parents said they were deeply disturbed, which was ridiculous. None of them have ever had to actually raise a teenager full-time. They believe every consequence is abuse. They think saying no is abusive. They think expecting respect is abusive. They were all so emotional that logic didn't matter. I kept trying to get them to calm down and see the bigger picture. I laid out how discipline keeps kids safe, how consequences teach accountability, how letting teenagers run wild only creates worse issues later. I made it clear that nothing I did harmed her. They refused to listen. They accused me of controlling behavior. They said I treated their granddaughter like property. They told me I needed professional intervention to understand the damage I was causing. It got hostile fast. At some point, they told me to leave. Not asked, told. Like I was the problem. Not the fact that Lydia had decided to pack a bag and disappear with no conversation. I walked out because staying there would have been pointless. Later that night, I found out Lydia had filed a police report, not for physical harm, but for unlawful confinement and coercive control. I read the terms twice because I couldn't believe how far she was stretching this. There was no confinement. She was in her room and the door wasn't locked. She could come out any time. She just needed to follow house rules. I wasn't holding her hostage. I wasn't restricting movement. I was disciplining a teenager who tested boundaries. The report wasn't enough to get me arrested, but it was enough to start a file. That alone pissed me off because it means she's trying to make a case against me like I'm dangerous. It also meant she had clearly decided there was no fixing this. If she wanted to talk, she would have talked. Instead, she involved law enforcement in what should have stayed between the three of us. I texted her after I found out. I explained how disrespectful it was to go behind my back. I explained how she undermined the entire household by running off with Cassidy instead of backing me up. I reminded her that discipline only works if both adults present a united front. I told her the report was unnecessary and made her look irrational. I laid everything out in detail so she couldn't twist my words later. She forwarded my message to the police. The next morning, I had a voicemail from a detective asking to discuss the domestic environment and restrictions imposed within the household. I wasn't worried, but I was insulted. I've done everything for that household. I'll update after I speak with the detective because I want to put everything on record before her family twists it even more. Update 2. I went into the detective interview assuming it would be another round of people overreacting because they can't handle basic discipline. I thought it would be a simple situation to explain. I expected the detective to eventually realize the only thing I'm guilty of is caring more about structure than most people do. I walked in confident because I knew the truth. The detective had a folder already open when I sat down. He didn't waste time. He told me Lydia provided recordings. I didn't even know recordings existed. I didn't think Cassidy had the initiative to record anything, so the idea that she had been doing it without my knowledge came across as manipulative on her part. I wasn't intimidated though, because nothing I said to her was wrong. The first recording started with me laying out the rules. I heard my own voice explaining that she needed to learn respect and responsibility. I heard myself laying out expectations she kept ignoring. The detective paused the audio a few times. He kept writing notes. None of this rattled me. I actually thought it supported my point that this was structured discipline. It wasn't chaotic or loud. It wasn't anything harmful. It was straightforward. Cassidy gets upset anytime you tell her no. The next recording had me explaining why the door was removed. I didn't see a problem with that. If a kid can't handle privacy responsibly, they don't get it. I never locked her in. She could walk out anytime. She just didn't like being told when she could eat or use her electronics. The detective paused the recording at the moment where I told her she didn't deserve a door until she earned respect. He kept typing notes without giving much away. Then came the part he actually reacted to. Cassidy had been crying, and I told her crying was manipulative. I said I didn't negotiate with manipulators. In the moment, That felt like a fair statement. I've seen her use tears as a way to avoid responsibility. I wasn't going to feed into that. The detective stopped the recording there. He asked me to confirm that I said it. I said yes because I'm not going to pretend I didn't mean it. He closed the folder after that. He told me they had enough information and that someone from CPS would reach out. The meeting was shorter than I expected. I took that as a sign they realized this was being exaggerated. I thought CPS involvement would be another round of clarifying basic parenting strategies for people who don't know how to handle teenagers. I didn't think it would go anywhere serious because there wasn't anything serious to find. CPS called the next morning. The caseworker said she needed a statement. She asked detailed questions about my expectations, routines, household structure, and discipline style. I answered every question honestly because I don't think there's anything wrong with what I do. She seemed bothered by the way I described my rules. She wrote down nearly everything I said. She kept pausing, like she was noting things Lydia said. She eventually said they were investigating emotional abuse. I told her the entire system was a clown show. Then everything escalated faster than I expected. CPS reached out again 2 days later with their decision. They determined my discipline methods pose emotional and psychological risks. That was their wording. They didn't ban me from seeing Cassidy, but they said Lydia was allowed to restrict access, especially unsupervised contact. That meant Lydia now had a legal foundation to cut me out. They worded it in a way that gave her the advantage. I wasn't allowed to contest anything immediately. I had to wait for a separate review if I wanted to dispute their findings. I could already guess how that would go, considering everyone involved seemed committed to misunderstanding everything I did. I'll update again when I figure out my next move. Update 3. I thought everything had finally hit the maximum level of stupidity, but apparently, I underestimated how far Lydia and her family were willing to drag this situation. The mediator session wasn't my idea at first, but I pushed for it when Lydia refused to respond to anything beyond short, clipped messages relayed through her family. I wanted something official where she couldn't twist my words or storm out whenever she got overwhelmed. She agreed faster than I expected, which should have been my first clue that she had some kind of angle. I walked into that session ready to lay things out plainly, not sugarcoat anything, and not let her rewrite events to suit her narrative. The shock hit me immediately when I entered the room and saw a man sitting next to her. I didn't recognize him. I thought maybe she brought one of her cousins, but he wasn't dressed like someone tagging along for moral support. He looked too settled, too comfortable. Lydia started acting like his presence was normal, which didn't make sense. I asked who he was, and she said he was Cassidy's father. I stood there trying to process that because the way Lydia talked for years made it sound like he was either non-existent or irrelevant. She never talked about him beyond a vague explanation that he left when Cassidy was a baby. I assumed that meant he wasn't a factor. I never questioned it because she always pushed the narrative that I was the main stable figure in Cassidy's life. Finding out she had reconnected with him months ago without telling me was a slap, but she didn't look embarrassed or guilty. She acted like she owed me nothing. She said they started rebuilding communication after Cassidy expressed interest. Apparently, Cassidy chose him over me a long time ago. I just didn't know because Lydia never said anything. She kept things separate so she wouldn't stress me. The way she phrased it made it sound like she was doing me some kind of favor, when really she created a situation where someone who should have been involved the whole time suddenly appeared with more authority than she ever allowed me. The mediator began with the basics, but things got tense immediately because I'll call him Daniel clearly came into that room with a list of things he wanted to unload on me. He said I overstepped for years. He said I acted like a replacement father even though he was never gone, as much as Lydia made it seem. He said I inserted myself into decisions that weren't mine to make. He said I damaged Cassidy's mental health. He said every disciplinary action I ever took created distance between Cassidy and Lydia. Listening to him talk like he had any understanding of what went on in that household was laughable. He didn't get to walk in after years of absence and act like I did everything wrong. But Lydia didn't defend me. She didn't correct him. She let him build an entire narrative that painted me as some tyrant who took advantage of her vulnerability. She sat there acting like she was hearing facts instead of biased assumptions. When the mediator asked Cassidy to speak, she didn't look at me once. She kept her eyes down and talked like she had rehearsed everything. She said she only rolled her eyes because I came downstairs right after she sat on the couch. She said I was monitoring the living room camera again. She said she had gotten used to me checking every alert because I always seemed to know where she was in the house. She said the notifications made her anxious. She said she hated the way I tracked her. I didn't deny any of it because I didn't think any of it was wrong. The camera exists for a reason. It's there to ensure order. If I get a motion alert after 9 p.m. in a room she was told not to be in, then yes, I'm going to check. That's how accountability works. I explained that in the session. I expected the mediator to understand. Instead, Daniel's entire posture shifted. He looked ready to get physical. The mediator had to intervene because it reached a point where he was staring me down, like he wanted to throw something. The mediator shut the session down early. He said tensions were too high and mutual communication was no longer productive. Lydia walked out with Daniel and Cassidy without a single glance in my direction. They acted like I wasn't even in the room. The entire thing felt staged, like Lydia agreed to mediation only to ambush me with Daniel so she could make everything look worse than it was. That should have been the end of it, but it kept spiraling because Lydia decided to escalate legally. She filed for a restraining order for Cassidy. She claimed emotional harm, monitoring behavior, controlling patterns, and a threat to Cassidy's well-being. Everything she listed was exaggerated or misrepresented. She turned disciplinary structure into a threat. She turned household order into coercion. She used the recordings, the CPS decision, and Daniel's testimony to build her case. I got served papers the next day. I had 48 hours to respond. Before I even had time to process it, Daniel contacted my landlord and got Lydia's name removed from the lease. She said she didn't want to be associated with the property anymore. That created another issue because my landlord flagged my place for domestic unrest. Neighbors started avoiding me. All of this because a teenager rolled her eyes and I refused to let it slide. Final update. After everything that happened with CPS, the mediator, and the restraining order filing, I decided I wasn't going to let this go quietly. I couldn't accept that Lydia and her family could rewrite the story and make it sound like I was some kind of criminal just for enforcing basic rules in my own house. I thought maybe if I presented my side to the only people who would listen, they'd see the situation clearly. That ended up being her extended family. I knew they already hated me, but I figured they were the last chance to at least make them see the reasoning behind my actions instead of blindly accepting Lydia's narrative. I showed up uninvited to a family barbecue. The moment I walked into the yard, I realized the tension immediately. There were stares, sideways looks, whispered comments. I ignored all of it. I set myself down in front of whoever would listen and started talking. I laid out everything I had done, everything Lydia had misrepresented, and every step I had taken to maintain order in my household. I explained the discipline with Cassidy, why the corrective reflection period was necessary, why I took the electronics and the bedroom door, why structure is important. I talked about monitoring the living room camera and why alerts are critical in keeping teenagers accountable. I explained my decisions as factually and plainly as I could. Almost immediately, the situation escalated. Someone called the police. Daniel confronted me. Cassidy started crying in the background, hiding behind Lydia's cousin. Instead of leaving, I stood my ground. I didn't see this as me being disruptive. I saw it as me finally explaining the truth. I didn't leave because I thought that was the rational thing to do. I didn't see myself as causing trouble. I thought they needed to hear the logic behind what they were calling abuse. Police arrived within minutes. They didn't arrest me, but the officer pulled me aside and told me I was on the edge of harassment. He said I needed to leave or face legal consequences. I left, but I didn't feel like I had lost. I felt like the officer didn't understand what was happening, and he didn't get the context, just like everyone else. I was humiliated to be removed from the situation, but still convinced that the entire scenario was a massive overreaction. The permanent fallout started immediately. The restraining order for Cassidy was granted. No more unsupervised interactions. My employer demoted me after they learned about the public confrontation and the ongoing family drama. Half of my family cut contact entirely, claiming I was toxic or out of control. What really solidified the collapse was how everyone kept interpreting my actions through this lens that I had no power in the household. I was the one enforcing rules, setting boundaries, and trying to maintain order. Every logical, structured action I took became control or abuse. My attempt at a public explanation didn't help because it was instantly reframed as aggression. Nothing I said could convince them otherwise. Every interaction, every attempt to explain my perspective, made it worse in their eyes. I ended up attending mandatory behavioral therapy because of the restraining order, not because I physically harmed anyone, not because I was violent, simply because my style of structure and discipline in my own home was considered emotionally harmful to a teenager. My supervisor told me to keep interactions strictly professional. I was cut off from family communication. Even after all this, I am still convinced I was in the right. I still believe that if Cassidy and other teenagers didn't act like tyrants, none of this would have happened. Every time I review the events, I see the cause and effect clearly. I see the choices I made as reasonable, necessary, and structured. I see the actions Lydia and Daniel took as escalations designed to make me appear irrational and dangerous. I know people will read this and assume I'm the villain. I know they will say I overreacted. I know they will label my attempts at structure as abuse. None of that changes the fact that I tried to enforce rules in a household where rules were ignored and boundaries were disrespected.